Well, hello again, and welcome to another episode of Sermon B-Sides. My name is Rusten. I'm one of the pastors here at Coram Deo Church, and I'm here with Pastor Jon.
What's up?
How you doing, man?
Good. We're rolling today.
We're rolling. We're doing another one.
Yep.
So, we are actually talking about Acts 17
Here
today.
we go.
The first 16 verses? Or
15.
15 verses, yeah.
The first 15.
15 verses of Acts 15. So this is, when you preached on this, it's interesting when you're going through Acts, week after week after week, you start to notice patterns.
Oh my goodness.
Start to notice that there's things that happen over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And there's certain things because of that like it feels like your sermon like you kind of do a lot of repeat sermons sometimes.
Yeah. I was like, I think I one of the sermons I kind of was making a joke of feeling like a broken record.
Yeah.
Because you could intro like a number of the sermons the same way because it's just the same thing happening over and over again. And I was like, I feel like a broken record, but Acts is kind of a broken record in the sense that you have this pattern that just keeps everywhere they go, the same thing kind of happens. And it's revolving around the preaching of the gospel, and of course you have conversions, and then you have like massive conflict.
Yeah.
Like big conflict. Like in the first 15 verses, you have Paul's in Thessalonica, right?
Yeah.
And he's preaching, and he's preaching Christ as King, which really is an interesting element of.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that our gospel preaching really tends to lack is kingship. But so he's preaching the gospel, and some of the Jewish leaders get angry, and so they get the rabble. They get like kind of like the trouble people, and they incite this riot and bring these charges. And then Paul and Silas they bounce out. They go to Berea, and the same people show up and do the exact same thing and cause another riot. So you have a lot of trouble following Paul's travels and preaching.
Yep. So troubles, and every once the same thing happens over and over again. But every time it's like something. There is an advance. There is.
Yeah.
They're going. They're doing what Jesus said in the very beginning of Acts.
Right.
Was you will be my witnesses in Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the world.
Yeah.
Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the world. And what Acts is really is just it's that happening. It's the beginning of seeing that happen.
Yeah.
It starts. It follows that exact route.
Yeah.
Jerusalem up until Acts 7.
Yep.
And then Judea.
Yep.
And then after that, you start to see ends of the world stuff.
Yep.
Right? Judea, Samaria, ends of the world stuff. Cyprus, Antioch. Now we're all over Asia Minor.
Both Antiochs.
Poseida and not Poseida. and Macedonia.
Yep.
And you feel like wherever now there's a couple crazy things that as you're doing this is like there's a combination of sometimes Paul comes places and there's already a church, like there's already people there.
Yeah.
And sometimes he goes there and there's not, and he has a custom going to the synagogues first.
Yep. First to the Jew, then the Gentile.
And it always ends up seeming like like the gospel does a couple of things. Like there's people in those synagogues who respond positively.
Yep.
That are Jews, but it's always emphasized that the Gentile God-fearers really responded positively.
Yep.
And then there's always a handful of Jews that after a while are like, whoa, we gotta shut this thing down.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So there's this weird, that's where the conflict in the beginning stems from. But then you have weird conflict, like you have the whole, the riots and, what was that? Was it with the slave girl?
That was
Philippi. That was Philippi.
Is that in Philippi?
No, it wasn't. No, yeah, it was. Yeah, it was Philippi because the Philippian jailer, right?
Yeah. So I gotta get my glasses really quick.
Yeah, I'll do it.
I'll be back.
I can't read. Whoa. I'll just cut that weirdness.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, it's all good.
First time ever in B-Sides that we had to leave.
Whoa, I was alone for like half
You
a
okay?
second. Yeah,
Right.
I don't know.
I hope you guys are
got some
fine.
existential like dread over here.
Whoa.
So, okay, so the
Yeah,
Philippian,
Philippi, yeah.
the Philippian jailer.
Yep.
That's when that all happened. So, you have these other conflicts. Like I think that's the first time I can recall there being conflict, and maybe you can correct me, that was not related to the Jews stirring up conflict.
With the Philippian jailer,
Yeah,
I think
with the girl, the slave girl.
You are right.
That's the first time I think we've seen conflict like
Yeah,
that.
the conflict with the Philippian.
The slave girl and the owners of the slave girl.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they were appealing to the magistrates in Philippi, but they weren't Jews who were causing the problem.
Yeah, that's the first time I can remember that happening.
Right, but the majority of the time it is Jews, and one of the patterns that's repeated in Acts 17 is that you have them traveling to cause trouble somewhere else.
I know. Yeah.
Right?
They're followed. We got a tail. Yeah. So,
which is really because we're going through Revelation right now.
Yeah.
And one of the critiques when Jesus is writing the letters to the churches, he talks about the synagogue of Satan, right? And that's what you're seeing in here. It's like, how do these Jews know that Paul's preaching the gospel? Well, Paul's at the synagogue. He's declaring the gospel, which is, in Acts 17, it talks about him, and in other, I want to say 13, he's demonstrating that Jesus is the Christ.
From the scriptures.
From the scriptures.
Yeah.
So Paul is a Jewish man at a Jewish synagogue dealing with a Jewish text, and many of these Jewish leaders are just don't want to have anything to do with it. And so much so that they're inciting riots, they're bringing accusations. When they, like earlier in Acts, where it's happening at the temple, they actually have the authority to throw them in prison. But here, you're outside. You're not in Jerusalem anymore.
So you just riot. And
you just riot
and you beat them up.
Appeal to other local authorities to do that.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
And so that, for instance, in Acts 17, you have the very reminiscent, actually verbatim reminiscent, condemnation of Paul and the church and Jason in particular.
Turning the world upside down?
Yeah, well, turning the world upside down, but the condemnation is these guys are preaching a different king. But we have no king but Caesar.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And that's very reminiscent of, that's exactly what the Jews in Judea said when Pilate's like,
presenting,
he's your king, right?
Yep.
Don't you want me to free your king? We have no king but Caesar.
Yes.
It's very similar. They're treating the church like they treated Jesus.
Yes.
And it's really important to emphasize this. Like, the church was primarily Jewish. Who had accepted their Messiah, the true Messiah of the Jews. So who's the real Jews here? The real Jews is the Christian church,
right?
Who is I described it as the relationship of chaff to wheat.
Yes,
it's the real real wheat of Israel.
When those first century Jews converted to Christianity, they were maturing in what their faith always was.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And the Jews that had rejected Christ as the Messiah were apostate Jews.
And they were chaff because of it.
Yes, and I think that's really important to draw that distinction that the trajectory of Judaism was always waiting for this promised Messiah. The Jews that believed that Christ was that Messiah were acting in line with their Judaism, with the faith that was handed down for generations. Those who rejected Christ the Messiah were apostatizing from their faith.
And that's exactly what John the Baptist preaches in the very beginning as making the way for Jesus. He says, he's talking to Jews.
Yes.
He's only talking to Jews. And he says, he's come with his threshing fork, and he will burn the chaff and gather his wheat into his barn. Right?
Yep.
He's talking about Israel, meaning there's chaff and there's true fruit.
Right.
And Jesus reveals, Jesus is the one who really, and there's an interesting background here too. The temple, which Jesus is the fulfillment of, is laid on the foundation of the threshing floor of Ornan, which David bought, which used to be Mount Moriah.
Was that the same threshing floor as the Boaz?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure.
I've heard something about that.
It might be.
I can't remember.
It might be. But it's a threshing floor, meaning it's a place where wheat and chaff is separated. And Jesus is the one who is in his person,
Yeah.
the place where wheat and chaff
Yes.
is separated.
Yes.
The wheat gets blown away,
Yeah.
or sorry, the chaff gets blown away and
Yep.
burned in the fire, and the wheat is brought in.
Yep.
Like that's what Jesus, when Jesus is revealed, you instantly see this divide. You have the disciples who, and the people who he has been, teaching, who receive him, and you have the Jews who want to kill him.
Yeah.
Right? And there's
Yep.
that's the, when the Pharisees show up, who warned you to flee the wrath to come?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Repent.
Yeah. Produce fruit in line with repentance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's very when we're talking about, I think that some people might be sensitive to it. Sounds like the church is like when the church shows up, it's like this new thing and all of a sudden everything God did in the past is like garbage.
Yeah, well, it would be like kind of a very hard replacement theology.
Yeah, and I think that is important to not fall into that. But I think it's also important not to see it as two different tracks.
Yes.
Like God has Israel as a people and God has a church as a people.
Yeah.
It's like he has one God, one people, one family.
Yeah, Paul will not allow for that type of theology. He's making one new man out of the two. Thus, right, putting an end to the hostility.
Ephesians 2, yes.
Yeah.
So one new man. So there is
one Lord, one baptism, one Savior.
One loaf.
One body.
Yes. So there's and that's because our God is one, right?
Yep.
And that's, I think, when you were reading this stuff and you're hearing about like even just Revelation, like how there's a judgment coming upon Israel. It's the judgment coming upon the chaff. The true Israel is those who are in Christ.
Yeah.
Right.
Who are sealed in Revelation 7.
And it's like finally
following us.
And finally that true Israel is blessing the nations. The Gentiles are coming in droves.
Yep.
And so, but in this section, you have the Jews inciting a rabble, which is a funny word. Like, I mean, they went and found the seediest people in town to go and you want to cause some trouble.
Wicked men of the rabble.
Yes, and then they take Jason. I'm imagining Jason is like.
It was a mostly peaceful protest, though.
Yeah, poor Jason. He's like brought before imagine this,
Jason.
Jason.
It's treason.
Yes, Jason is a member of the synagogue who has basically received Jesus as Messiah.
Yeah,
and they imagine this like you're in the church. And it's all took place over 3 days. Like some guy comes into your church and says this guy Jesus, he's the Messiah, he's the King, he's the Lord.
Yep.
And then a good chunk of your congregation is like, oh sweet, and based on these 3 weeks of teaching, I could see how it's coming to fruition from Scripture. It's like, and then a couple guys are like, what? And it's not like get out of no. We need to clean the church out of this movement. It's no. I'm gonna go to the police and say that this guy is a member of Al Qaeda.
Yeah,
and
that's exactly what it's like.
And we're gonna have this guy killed, basically.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah,
like they're turning the world upside down.
Yeah,
right.
Which was true.
Yep, which was true. Yes,
they were turning the world upside down.
Yes, they weren't. They weren't Al Qaeda, but
they were turning the world right side up.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
that's probably a better way to say it.
Yeah, and so then they end up leaving. Right, they end up leaving Thessalonica, and they go to Berea. Mm-hmm. And in Berea, it sounds like there's a major difference between Berea and Thessalonica that they examined. There was
Scriptures.
There's an emphasis in Thessalonica that they met on Sabbaths and had it heard to them, or had it preached to them from Paul. In Berea, it says they received the word with all eagerness, examining the Scriptures daily. The difference, it seems to me, because I was like, well, it seems like they're getting reasoning from the Scriptures. In Thessalonica, and they received it with eagerness. But Berea, they're like taking it, every day, considering these things, really digging into it. And then many of them believed, and then again, the rabble was like, they're in Berea, we're going there, right?
Yeah.
Not in our watch, right?
Yeah.
And then it gets so bad that Paul has to actually. It must be Paul is like the guy talking the most, because like Silas and Timothy don't have to go with him, but they basically whisk him out quickly.
Yeah.
Right. And he
goes.
goes.
His life's in danger.
He goes ahead to Athens, which is where we'll be this Sunday.
Yeah.
But
we, you mean you.
yes, me. Yes. So you emphasize something that we've seen kind of along the way, which is the role of women converts, or at least not the role, but calling out women converts.
Luke as specifically
Yeah.
identifying it. Yeah.
Yeah, women converts, not just women converts in high standing.
Yeah.
Lydia, the
Lydia?
purple North Face,
I call it the
North
dealer.
Face dealer. Lydia, you have here you have more women in high standing.
Yeah. In both places, he identifies it.
Yeah, and you get this theme in a couple places, not just in Acts, but also in the letters of Paul and in some of the epistles of John, that there's a handful of women who are hosting churches. They're acting hospitable.
Yeah.
Right? They become patrons of the churches in terms of hosting and
Right.
supporting. And I think the last two of John's epistles are addressed to the lady in the church in her house.
Yep.
Right? So
2 John, 3 John.
yeah, 2 John, 3 John, exactly. There is significance to that.
Absolutely.
And there's I think cultural stuff that was even maybe weird. Some of it was weird back then. And then there's cultural stuff today that you need to address as well, that I think you talked about in the sermon. But you want to talk about that a little bit?
Say that last part again.
There's an not so much an application, but kind of there's something exposed here, both culturally back then.
Yes,
But now about
Okay.
this that is worth addressing.
Yeah. So I mean, Luke obviously feels like it's worth addressing because he's calling it out.
Yeah.
But there's something about unique right now that I think that these almost side comments, that Luke is making, really call into question the way people today are trying to convince women that Christianity is oppressive, that Christianity is their enemy. If you want to be a woman, then you can't have anything to do with Jesus. You can't have anything to do with the church or the Bible. Yeah. It's all oppressive. It's patriarchy. That whole thing. And so on the one hand, you're hearing people say that, and Luke's going, "Oh, there's these really successful business women," and I think that Luke is probably talking about single women here.
Yeah, I think you're right.
That they were successful, they were women of influence in their community, and they're coming to Christ. And that's the one thing that our culture wants to say can't happen. It won't happen. The only kind of the women who are Christians are the barefoot pregnant in the it's that kind of a caricature.
Yeah.
And what Acts is saying is no, these were prominent, influential, business owning, most likely fairly wealthy women, and they were they found the gospel beautiful and compelling, and did not see it at all as a threat to their femininity or their womanhood.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that there's some of the reason why there's that belief is because one, if you go look at Proverbs 31, and the woman described there, she's a successful businesswoman.
Yeah.
She is a seller of goods. She is diligent, and she's disciplined, and she's fruitful.
Yeah.
Her hands are fruitful.
Yeah.
That requires a level of ambition, and it requires a level of discipline. And I think that there's kind of a distortion of that says the woman. Part of it's because the household has been redefined such that our work is disconnected from our homes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because I think that there's a good impulse that pushes against the feminist movement, right? That good impulse is this idea that the home. The impulse against pushing against it is that this idea that the home is not a place of worth, right?
Yes.
And I think that that's a lie from the pit. And there's nothing more valuable you could do than raise children.
Yeah.
That's a glorious thing.
Yeah.
But back then, your household was often also your business.
Your business. Yeah.
So what we've done is we've divorced the two,
Yep.
and then we're trying to promote the one at the expense of the other.
Yeah.
Whereas that's not what's happening with
Right.
these women of high standing.
Right.
And I think that what's
Or with that Proverbs woman.
Oh, yeah.
right?
No,
that
yeah.
business that
Yeah.
that she's participating
Yeah.
is not something that's taking her away from children
Yeah.
12 hours a day.
No,
It's probably
exactly.
something that's happening. And there,
Yeah.
if she's selling goods, guess who's making them?
yeah. Yes.
Her and the kids.
Exactly. And I
Right?
think-
And then maybe workers that are living with them as well.
Yeah, and there's a good case to be made here too, that if you are able, as a household, and this is like not a lot, like this is just I think a good thing if you are able to do this. If you're able as a household to have a household business where the family all works together. And there's something like C.R. Wiley talks about it as productive property,
Yeah.
right? That's something worth pursuing because there's a huge value in working together with your family on stuff. Your kids seeing mom and dad working in the household together in different roles and ways. And I think that what the post-industrial age has made most men wage slaves in terms of they don't own anything; they just go work for somebody to get a wage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's it's not as bad as slavery,
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah.
but it's not the same thing as it's not. It doesn't require.
owning property.
It doesn't
producing something.
It doesn't require the same level of diligence and wisdom.
Yeah.
And I think that's just our situation. It's not something we can turn back the clock on.
Right,
But it
right.
is something that if you're able, I think that there is a value there. Some people just aren't made to do that, and that's. I think that more people are made to do that than think they are. But that ability to work together with your home it would be a beautiful thing. Reintegrating things, not that that's the goal. Like you have to do that, but I think that allows a presence of mom and dad that is unique. It sounds impossible when I think about it, but there are
Yeah.
people who do it, right?
Yeah.
So, but all that to say, there's all kinds of differences between now and then.
Yeah.
That like, and I think that if we try to apply womanhood from the Bible to our current situation now, it does often turn into the woman isn't supposed to be productive. She's just supposed to be like super domesticated and not savvy.
Yeah.
Like that's a lie. Like that's the lie you're addressing with with this. And I think that's the fruit of trying to apply some biblical truth to a post-industrial age, removing all of the other stuff that was present, right?
Well, and there's another lie that's in there too, right? When you, couldn't get into this in the sermon, but the first lie that is told to Eve in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
And essentially that lie is that God's plan, God's order, God's structure for you is not good.
Yeah.
And if you want to have pleasure and life and wisdom, you're going to have to do this on your own terms. Right?
Yeah.
And that's the lie when we just got
Yes.
done talking about abortion.
Yeah.
That's
Same
the
thing.
lie that's
Yeah.
present there. That's the lie that the serpent still tells women today that the way that God has designed humanity, the way that he has assigned unique purposes and gifts and strengths to different genders and assigned different responsibility and roles within the context of marriage and the home, those things are all bad, and those things are all going to, they're going to take life from you. And so if you really want to be fulfilled, you need to violate what God has said.
Yeah.
It is the exact same lie. And so there's like two ditches, right?
Yeah.
The one is the lie that I just said. The other lie is one that you're saying is that, well, if you're going to, be a Christian woman or a Christian mom or a Christian mother, that you can have no interest in business or industry or any of that. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, that's actually not
Yeah.
the case. And
Yeah.
I know, our church is full of incredible wives and mothers that are not only
Very industrious.
they're very industrious and creative and doing amazing things and contributing and flourishing and doing
Yeah.
well. So I think you got to be aware of both of the lies on either side of that ditch.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But what Luke is making abundantly clear in this text is that you do have these industrious, successful, influential women, and guess what? They were compelled by the gospel, right?
Yeah.
And that flies right in the face of so much of what the secular culture is telling women.
What's interesting to me though, and this is like probably like a whole nother episode, but is that these women, the trend, you see a trend, which is women of high standing often being the patrons of a church, meaning like they end up having churches in their homes or hosting churches. Like that happens frequently,
Yes.
frequently enough that I'm like, that's
Yep.
interesting.
Yep.
There's a pattern there, right?
Yeah.
You see that happening way more than it happening in a particular guy's house, right?
Yeah.
And I can't help but think that some of that speaks to the kind of differences in which the gifts being used in ways that are unique to men and women. Paul, like the people you see going out frontier preaching, right, are men.
Yeah.
Right? Paul actually tells, like in Corinthians, like I kind of wish that more people were like me, not married, right?
Yeah.
So that they could go and preach the gospel.
Because his life is in danger everywhere he goes.
You can't care for a family if you're doing that, right? Well, you mentioned something earlier. You said that it seems like a lot of these women are single, right?
Yeah.
The single women who are of high standing are like being extreme, like he's being extreme in his preaching of the word and being able to go places.
Yeah.
These apparently single women in high standing are being extreme in their hospitality. And the what's the word I'm thinking of? Yeah, the hospitality and what's necessary for the cultivating of a community in a church.
Yeah.
And it's like I can't help but see that and think, oh, it's almost like you have mirror images of these roles being played out in the formation of these churches and this like it's not the role happening within marriage, but it's like the roles of man and woman happening in these church planting operations.
Yeah, I'll speak really generally to this.
Yes.
Because we don't want to go too far or too long, but men have an initiating call.
Yeah.
And women have more of a nurturing call.
Yeah. Nurture, that's what I was thinking of. Hospitality and
guys
nurture.
got to go to war.
Yeah.
And mom needs to care for the house while dad's gone, right?
Yeah.
There's a general principle in there that I think is biblical. You're seeing that with Paul. Who's going out?
Who's getting beat up?
Who's getting beat up? It's Paul.
Yeah.
But clearly Lydia is opening her home and nurturing not just Paul, but the people who were with him.
Yeah. And it's like she prevailed upon them nurture. Come.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know those ladies, right? Like it's great.
Yeah.
So I think you can see a little bit of that going on where Paul is on the front lines initiating the gospel war, if you will.
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen without this nurturing presence ministry, and clearly there are these prominent women are participating in that.
It's the war. It's the battlefront and the home front.
Yes.
Right. It's you need both.
Both are important.
Yeah. Both are important. Yeah.
In talking about it, it reminds me a little bit of women play this unique role in the Gospels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. There's a unique role clearly in the book of Acts, but there seems to be a unique sensitivity on the women's part where even the male disciples are like, ooh, right? So it's like who's at the tomb? Like in Luke 24.
It's the woman. Yeah.
Who's there, right? And they're telling the guys, right? And then Thomas is, what is Thomas? I won't know, never. So there is this unique role I'll just
Yeah.
put it that way.
Yeah.
That these women are fulfilling
Yeah.
ministry, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's different.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah, totally. Well, cool. You feel good about that one?
I do. Is
All
that
right.
we're gonna close it to an end there?
I think so. I think that we touched on all the things, right? We talked on conflict, and
we didn't talk about the suffering, but I talked a lot about that in the text. So.
Yeah, totally. All right, cool.
Yeah, cool. All right.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed hanging out with us for B-Sides. Remember, again, we have a Revelation episode hopefully coming soon. Send us your questions at pastor@quorumdeochurch.org. But until next time, trust Christ, go to church, and love your neighbor. Peace.
See ya.